All right, I'm here with Dr. Akilah, Carter-Francique. We're here at the Black Male Student Athlete Conference at the University of Texas. It's been an awesome conference with some awesome presentations. I just want to take a minute here to get some of the emerging superstars in the field of sport to share with you some of the work that they're doing. Akilah, tell me a little bit about your work and your expertise and your passion with regard to research in sport.
I think my work really starts with my passion. I'm a former collegiate athlete, and really that was something that jump-started my whole research agenda when I was recruited by my major professor, Dr. Billy Hawkins, and I actually say kind of hoodwinked into it, tricked into it. It was one of the things that one of my first projects I looked at was the retirement and transition of black male student athletes. And as I started reading that literature and going more and more into depth, I started to look through the pages and realize that there were no stories, there was no research, there was no literature on black female athletes. And I was like, well, I was one. Where is my story? Where am I in this? And it was very interesting. And the reason I mentioned Dr. Hawkins is that eventually when I came to the point, I said, I really want to switch my topic. He said, I'm glad you finally found it. So it was something he had been wanting me to do all along, but he wanted me to go ahead and find my pathway to that. And so that's what I researched, black female student athletes, but more broadly, black females in sport and physical activity. My undergraduate major is in exercise science. I have a psych degree as well, and then my master's in exercise science. So I was starting out wanting to be a track coach. I was also a personal trainer, so I was really involved in the physical fitness state of things, and then ended up switching over and sort of looking at the lived experiences of these young people as well as college athletes in general. And so I look at black females and what's going on with them when it comes to their health and wellness, particularly obesity, because there's not too many things that we're winning in, but we're winning in bad health as black women from an obesity issue and those obesity-related diseases that correspond with that. And then, understanding that physical activity is a way to bridge to sport participation, sort of looking at that intersectionality, if you will, and then where are we participating in sport? And, so all those things kind of go hand in hand. And so the research just really focuses on exploring those challenges from, again, the physical activity standpoint, but then also some of the barriers to physical activity, and then those barriers that end up being barriers to sport participation, access, and then the subsequent challenges that come from being a black woman in America and a black woman in sport.
That's a lot. That's complex, especially when we talk about the intersectionality. That we always talk about in terms of the theory and whatnot. And Akilah is one of the few women scholars across the board who is researching this issue, which is a tribute to your work and the fact that you're going into uncharted waters, and it's a beautiful thing. Talk a little bit about your presentation, which was outstanding.
Thank you. My presentation was the ethic of care. It really kind of came from, again, my experience. I'm going to take from one of my colleagues that talks about, she says, I do research. And I understand that. A lot of my research has been on experiences that I have had or challenges that I have seen my sisters, and I mean my track sisters or my athletic sisters, go through. And so today's presentation was called the ethic of care, and really sort of dealt with this notion of, we as black women, collegiate athletes, have challenges. A lot of this conference, and it's been excellent, I'm not going to take anything away from it, a lot of this conference is focused solely on the black male student athlete. And the focus and the issues that have come up are definitely, necessary to cover. But if we start looking at some of the experiences of these black female student athletes, we'll find that they're facing some of the same situations.
Absolutely.
They're coming from those same homes. They're coming from those same communities. They're still dealing with also the lack of academic preparedness, if you will, and having some of those transitional challenges from high school to college. So, it's necessary to shine a light on their experiences as well. I think with sort of this overemphasis on the experience of the black male, it becomes one where we think that the black female athlete's okay. And we're assuming that she's okay. But even when you look at the numbers and the statistics, she's overly represented in track and field. She's overly represented in basketball. But when you look at the numbers of representation, it's a small population of black female student athletes on these predominantly white campuses.
That are on campus.
So she's even more isolated than that black male athlete. She's even more alienated because, again, it's a small cohort of women, and then they're split between basketball and track and field.
It's true.
So there's some challenges that she's dealing with that are also unique from the black male experience. And so this notion of the ethic of care really came from my experience of being a female athlete at the University of Houston, in which when I stepped onto campus, when I got there, the older women on the team basically said, "You're with me." And it became this notion of, I'm my sister's keeper. But once I graduated, and actually a couple of years before I did, I started to see this sort of change in how we as female athletes communicated with one another and interacted with one another. It was almost one where I think it was moving towards from a direction of collectiveness to a direction of this individuality that we see often in the way college sports has moved into a very individualistic mentality. And then once I started to work on my dissertation, and my dissertation focused on the identity development of black female student athletes. And so it was one that, they were having challenges as well. And the voices that I was hearing from these young women of, I've got to take care of me. I don't have time to take care of her. She's got to figure it out on her own, because I did. So it moved from this "I'm my sister's keeper" mentality to one of, you got to take care of your own. And so I'm really wanted to talk about this notion of ethic of care, talking about the need for support programs for black female student athletes, and to bring back this notion of sisterhood.
And those are some outstanding points that Dr. Carter-Francique makes, because I never really thought about it. When we would examine male student athletes compared to female student athletes, we would look at graduation rates and say, well, the female student athletes, they're graduating, their percentage is okay, so they must be okay. But as you and I know, like you said, the isolation, because they're the smaller population. I've worked with track student athletes before, and how that track team is a little bit different. There's some things that the size of it. You're in the individual
men and women together.
Too.
So there's another different type of community relationship there. And then you have the black female student athletes on the basketball team. There are 15, 20 girls, and that's it. And we're finding, because they are a revenue-producing sport as well, that their recruitment and their issues are looking very similar to that of the black male football and basketball player in those revenue-producing sports.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you had a picture up today. I'm a student athlete that I work with at Rutgers. And it was interesting because, very smart academically, did very well. And 4 years out of Rutgers, she's totally changed her interest, her profession, her career. And we talked about it a little bit. She said, I just couldn't major in that while I was playing basketball at Rutgers. It wasn't possible, but now that I'm not, I was able to pursue my passion. And we really don't think about that. That's probably not identity foreclosure as much as it is, a delay in their career development. But it impacts our female student athletes just like it impacts our guys. Akilah, right now, what's the hot button issue for you in college sport? What really, at the end of the day, is something that interests you and something that you may be looking at in the future?
I think it still goes along that line of development, but more so how these young women are dealing with the images that are being presented of them. And it goes beyond even college sport to when we start looking at our Olympic athletes. Gabby Douglas just went through it with the 2012 Olympics, and a lot of the ridicule that she faced, not only, within the media, but a lot of it from the black media, and black community with regards to her challenges. The experiences and the mediated image of Venus and Serena Williams. And it's one of those things of how do these young women that see this reflection and this commentary on themselves, right? Because they don't have an opportunity to speak about it.
Right.
to have their voice, to
It's
talk
just the
about
image
why
that's out
this
there.
happened.
Yeah, yeah.
And so how do they deal with that? How do they cope with that? How do they come into their own? Because there's an assumption of if you're in basketball, you have a certain sexual orientation.
That's right. Yep, yep, yep.
There's an assumption that if you're on the track and field team, that you are very involved in sexual activity.
Right.
You know, and I'm just to be real with it. And so it's one of those things of how do they deal with this imagery that's put out there about them when they know that they represent something totally different, when they know their mom and dad instilled in them some of these values and characteristics that are totally juxtaposed against what the media is putting out about them. How do you render that in the space as a student athlete? And so I think that's, to me, one of the big issues I want to start getting into of how do these young women start to deal with these mediated images?
Yeah.
How do they deal with that? But also, what sort of support do they have to be able to address that? So again, coming back to this ethic of care, coming back to the sense of community and sisterhood, in which we are able to begin to start educating them on this is nothing new.
Right.
It started a long time ago.
Yeah.
You know, when we talk about the controlling images or the stereotypical images of the black woman as the mammy, you know, as a matriarch, as that Jezebel, as that welfare mother, and how it's manifested into the gold digger and diva. And so we have these images out there that the public eye wants to put us in, even society would like to put us into these particular categories when we really don't fit into any of them.
That's right. That's
so
right.
how do you deal with that?
Right,
Yeah.
but then the behavior, those images, those mediated images begin to impact behaviors and attitudes, you know, which is where, you know, a lot of our student athletes, both male and female, tend to get into trouble because they're trying to fulfill a prophecy.
Yes.
So I'm going to put you on the spot here for a minute. In the
Okay.
spirit of the Chris Rock